Hello, and welcome to Awkward Family Conversations, an intergenerational discussion of topics of interest to millennials and Zoomers. I'm here with my dad, Rhett, who is the creator of the infamous, iconic, amazing one-legged hop dance. Hi, Dad.
Hello, Ed. Thank you for that stirring introduction. I am joined with my younger daughter, Addie. When Addie was growing up, we had a dog as our family pet, but she borrowed all kinds of other animals to have in our house. So we've had many, 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 many animals in our house. So her love of animals goes back to her early days, in fact. What was your favorite guest animal that we had?
My baby guinea pigs.
Your guinea pigs. These are ones from the Lindsay Museum? All right, very
I
good.
still make people look at pictures of them because they're so cute.
And that was probably 8 years ago?
It was 2015.
It was 5 years ago.
5 years.
All right, that's not too bad. Very good.
I have the same phone, so. No, I don't. That's a lie. I've only had one phone since.
I see. And I guess I got Callie's hand-me-up phone, not yours. So
That's the Zoomer frame of reference.
how many phones you
phones
had?
have we gone through?
Very, very good. What's our topic for today's conversation, Addie?
Well, today we were talking about what can I expect from my career arc. So what's it going to look like, Dad? Predict the future.
What's it going to look like? Yeah, this is a little bit more amorphous than some of our previous questions. But I think we can take some, we'll take a look at our 2 minutes of internet research, which will form the structure for our discussion this afternoon. Yeah, and then we'll just kind of extrapolate what we can based on that. I saw a futurist, a guy named Ian Morrison. He worked for the aptly named Institute for the Future in Palo Alto. I saw him many years ago. He said, being a futurist is one of the easiest jobs in the world because it's all about demographics. And so we will start our 2 minutes of internet research with sort of a broader demographic picture of, kind of what we can, because that will inform what we can expect in the environment. So as of today, in the environment, you've got 3 generations with the 4th joining as the first exits. And so baby boomers have been in the process of exiting the workforce now for several years, retiring. But there's still many boomers in the workplace. And the boomers are a huge generation. There's 80 million baby boomers in the US, so very large.
Didn't see that one coming.
Yeah, hence the boom part, I guess. Gen X, which is the next generation, is a trough generation. So there are only 40 million Gen Xers in the country, and
they're all having a bad time.
And they're not all having a bad time, but typically and again, these are broad. I see our audio engineer intern has joined us. That would be Addie's cat Claire, walking back in front of her screen.
She's been moving the camera around. She's studying for the video part of her internship.
As part of her internship. Very good. So anyway, the Gen X, what is broadly said, or what broadly characterizes Gen X, is more independence than the baby boomers and more focus on sort of their internal journey as opposed to an external journey. And so they're not super motivated and super interested in being a boss. So you've got boomers who are a large generation, but they're retiring from the workplace. You've got Gen Xers who really kind of value their independence as a generation, and are really not super interested in being the boss, and there are not very many of them anyway. So what's kind of exciting for millennials, Zoomers, you've had certainly a tough start to the millennial career for sure, and Zoomers as well. But there's gaps that are being created in the workplace right now. So that bodes well for the career for a while anyway. We'll talk a little bit about that. But there are 80 million millennials, so basically the same size as the baby boom generation. Not sure where Gen Z, I didn't do enough. 2 minutes didn't leave me enough time to find the size of the Gen Z, but I suspect it's not as big as the millennial generation. What do millennials want in the workforce? There's not a lot of data on Gen Z yet because you guys have not been working very long, and so it's tough to pull out a lot of behavioral or data because you haven't been able to sort of find your generational personality yet. But looking at millennials, and I would say that Zoomers probably align better with the millennials than any previous generation. Because you share a lot of things in common with them. Probably the most prominent thing that I would say the Gen Z and the millennials share is this digital nativism, the fact that you're super comfortable with technology in a lot of different platforms. So you're very comfortable working, interfacing with technology, more so than previous generations. Confident, collaborative, entrepreneurial, also impatient, and having received a lot of feedback and a lot of interaction, you like you like that interaction. You like that as a generation. Again, you're going to have individual variances, but you're much more connected to each other. Part of that's the technology piece. Part of that is just the way you were raised. You guys were raised by a generation of parents who treated you more as equals than previous generations treated their children. And so you have, we'll call it entitlement without meaning the negative things that come with that, but you're expecting to have an equal voice and a seat at the table that previous generations were not expecting. And so that's a characteristic of the millennial worker. Multitasking is something that kind of you do. I'm not sure that I think studies have shown that that's not a super effective way, but that's just the way that millennials and Gen Z people work, is that you're used to doing a whole lot of things all at the same time. You prefer e-communication, so the texting, the quick message, whether it's Snapchat or Instagram or whatever, you like to communicate electronically, and you want continuous exposure to challenges and interesting things. So you want to be intellectually stimulated. You don't want to just you don't have a real tolerance for boredom, and some of that shows up in the impatience part. You're not somebody who's going to sacrifice a lot of drudgery, or you're not gonna put up with drudgery even if there's a benefit farther on down the line. There's lots of studies I read, or lots of studies I read about in my 2 minutes of internet research, that said millennials are more interested in interesting work than they are in earning money. So status and money is less of a motivator for millennials than it is for previous generations. Not to say they're not interested in it, but they're much more interested. They will sacrifice money to do interesting, engaging, stimulating work. And they like constant informal feedback. I mean, this is part of what they've grown up with, right? They're at the table, they're getting constant feedback from their parents. They're engaged and connected with friends, and so they're used to a high degree of feedback. So if they're in a bit of a vacuum, an informational vacuum, it makes them a little uncomfortable, more so than it did other previous generations. And again, these are broad statements about a generation. Within that, you're going to have all kinds of different individuals, but that's a second sort of data point. So we've got the size of the generations. You've got the way that, in general, millennials are approaching the workplace. There's a couple other things I think we need to keep in mind. As popularized by Malcolm Gladwell in his book Outliers, there's a study that showed that, well, there have been several studies that show you need about 5 years of full-time work to truly master a job, or we'll call it a job, but really anything. If you want to be an expert at anything, it's going to take you 10,000 hours, which is basically 5 years of 2,000 hours, which is what a full-time job requires, to become expert at something. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing to remember is that the workplace has always been a very dynamic environment, both externally and internally. So no matter what organization you're working with, technology is changing, the competitive landscape is changing, the internal structure is changing. You've got people coming and joining the company, you've got people leaving the organization, skills are being updated, customer demands are changing and expectations change. So that's always been part of a workplace, but that pace of change is accelerating, and it's largely driven by technology. We can have the cycle time between iterations of things is becoming much faster, and that will probably continue to change. These types of things typically don't slow down because they lead to significant improvements in customer experience, which drives profits and revenues and profits and things. The companies that adapt faster to the needs or create expectations in their clients are going to be rewarded for that. That's always been the case, and that'll continue to be the case. But what that means is technology enables faster change. You're going to have more of it in the same period of time. So if you're looking at say a 40-year career of working, you're going to deal with much more change than previous generations just because the pace of change has really accelerated. So finally, and this is something I'm experiencing firsthand, aging affects capability. And this will become important as we talk a little bit about what you can expect sort of late career. Just different physiological and mental acuity studies have shown that over in adulthood, so starting at about age 20 and going up to about age 60 to 80, you will have a 40% decline in physical capacity. I mean, it just gets harder to do things physically as you age. And this will become relevant in a few minutes. There's also, in terms of mental capability, and looking at it in two dimensions, there's some good news and some bad news as it relates to aging when it comes to mental acuity. The first is your flexible, what they call fluid mental abilities. And these are, processing speed, how well you're able to take on absorb new information. That declines 2 standard deviations. So looking at a chart, when you're younger, you're typically, about, we'll say, 3/4 of a standard deviation above the mean for mental fluidity. By the time you hit your, late adulthood, your 60s, 70s, 80s, you're about 1 full standard deviation below the mean, and it's basically a linear drop. So over time, you will lose your ability to track, which is all related to learning new things. However, your crystallized mental abilities, so these are things that you learn and stay constant. So and one way they measure this is looking at your vocabulary. Your crystallized mental abilities actually increase from the time you're young until you're about age 60, and then at 60 it plateaus. You don't ever lose that. So if you learn something, you get more efficient at it, and you're able to do it more effectively. But it's this is the efficiency. Once you know how to do something, you won't lose that, and in fact, you'll get better at doing it because you'll learn a little bit, what works better. So basically, what that says is the things you know how to do, you get better at, more efficient. The things you don't know how to do, i.e., you have to learn, it gets harder and harder as you age. So keep that in mind as we start talking about this. But so does this make sense to you?
It does.
We're talking about 3 sort of different pieces that we'll kind of weave together and talk about how that relates to sort of career as you go. But
talked about the mental acuity and everything, I think, in the first episode.
We talked about it on the
unreleased pilot.
No, I think we talked about it as part of the presentation that I made to you and your sister about economic cycles.
Maybe that was what it was. Okay, I feel like we talked about it on this podcast though, but
we may have. If we did, it wasn't in quite as much detail. And I don't have the charts today, so those of you who are listening are not going to be at any greater disadvantage than those people who are watching, other than you're missing Claire's tail as it goes back and forth in front of
Well,
it.
she's on the ground now, so that's done. But maybe Superfan Mike could tell us.
Our super fan Mike from Indianapolis.
Yeah. Well,
He
then
did
I do have my next question for you, which is, what should I expect now, in like the near future?
the near future. All right. So here's the thing. What you can expect over the course of your career is much more flexibility, much more mobility compared to previous generations. So basically what that means is you're going to have more control and more choice in terms of how you work. When I started my career, where I worked was defined for me. I had to go into an office. When I went to work was defined for me. I had to basically be there, for 8 to 9 hours between the hours of 7 in the morning and 6 at night. But it was pretty prescribed. So try to get 8 to 9 hours, but I couldn't really come in any later than 9, and I couldn't really leave any earlier than 4. So I'd need to, so I very little control there. And they told me what to wear. There was a dress code. I had to wear a tie. I had to wear a sport coat at least, and a suit would be better. So, that changed during the course of my career, but you guys are going to have much more flexibility, and you already do, in terms of where you work, how you work, the hours you work, what you wear, when you work. And it's really become, I think, apparent as we've moved to remote working because of the COVID pandemic that we're experiencing. But you guys, that flexibility is going to be a hallmark, I think, of going forward. Now, that's going to be good for you because it gives more control. But it also means that there's less structure and less framework to keep you from working longer or overcommitting to your job. There's not going to be the things. When I left when I left the office, I didn't have a computer. I had one at the office, didn't have one at home, so that I could access, and so I couldn't do any work. Now that's not a thing. You can work anytime you want. When I left the work, I was basically working with the same people in my office. Now work can be around the globe. I've had conference calls scheduled at 10 o'clock at night, my time, to accommodate somebody who's in Taiwan or somebody who's in India. And so, the flexibility cuts both ways. The demands and the expectations are that you will do what you've got to do, but that means it's going to be incumbent on you to carve out your time for recovery and for the other interests and other things that are in your life, including the relationships, the hobbies, just your recovery time, your downtime. So, so as a general statement about your career, these are things that I think are going to be. This is what your career is going to be look like from a how you do it. But let's talk. You asked, okay, what can you expect right now? Early career. So let's talk about the first 10 years of your career. This is going to be a time of exploration. It's going to be a lot more volatile. We've talked in previous episodes about the headwinds, the economic headwinds that millennials in particular, but also Gen Z, the Zoomers here, are facing with the Great Recession from 12 years ago, and now the COVID pandemic recession. These are stiff economic headwinds, to be sure. And therefore, it's going to be a more volatile start to your careers than other generations have had. And, impatience and 5 years of practice to become an expert are tough. It's tough to reconcile those two pieces, right? If it's going to take you 5 years to master a job, master a role, you've got to be able to have the patience to execute on that. Now, that doesn't mean you won't have interim promotions and there couldn't be interim rewards, but to truly master a craft, master a talent or a capability, if you want to, if you're going to be an accountant, you're going to need to see a lot of different examples of things, and over the course of 5 years, you'll get a pretty broad sample of the types of things you'll have to deal with in your career. And over those 5 years, you'll probably see just about everything that you'll see the rest of your career. But it's going to take you 5 years, and if you don't have the patience to kind of slog through that, you're not going to become an expert, or your expertise will be slowed down because you're going to be kind of jumping in and out of roles. And if those roles are not related, and if they're not in that same discipline or in that same if you're a customer service rep, I mean, if you start as a customer service rep and decide, now I want to jump into sales, or I want to get into marketing, I mean, you're starting all over again. You're starting your clock on your 10,000 hours, maybe not completely, but in large measure. And so it's going to be a difficult, and then you've got these economic headwinds. You're going to be learning stuff at a rapid rate. You'll probably be rewarded because, as I said, we've got these demographic shifts that are happening. Boomers are retiring and they're leaving the workplace. Gen Xers, there's not enough of them to fill these positions that the boomers had, and they're not especially interested in doing that. And so you're going to have more opportunities, but you're not necessarily going to be as talented as the people leaving, or as expert as the people leaving, because you're going to have to spend time. Now, the 2,000 hours is what a regular 8-hour-a-day job looks like. I mean, if you're willing to invest 12 hours a day, 5 days a week, you'll get there, 50%, or, you'll get there 33% faster. You'll get to your 10,000 hours. So maybe it's only 3.5 years. And this is, when you read Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, he talks about Bill Gates learning computer language. And it was because, I mean, he learned it fast because he was doing it all the time. So he became an expert faster than a 5-year time frame, because he was just, he loved it so much. He was just doing it constantly. And so there's certainly shortcuts there you can take. And you'll have the physical stamina and the mental acuity, mental fluidity to kind of overpower tasks. You'll be able to work 12 or 14 or 16 or 18-hour days, many days in a row, which somebody who is 60 is not going to be able to match that kind of stamina and that kind of effort. And so, while you still may not be expert, you can turn over a lot of cycles and get to the same place. It's not as efficient, but you can still get the job done just by overpowering it, time and energy. So I think, early in your career, the first 10 years, it's going to be volatile. You're going to learn stuff at a really rapid rate. First of all, you have the ability to learn stuff at a really rapid rate. You're technologically savvy and comfortable. So technology is not an inhibitor, and in fact, can be a facilitator for your career, because you'll have knowledge and experience that you'll bring to the workplace, that will transform it, and that organizations will find use for. But then, you'll also be learning a ton, and there will be opportunities because of the exodus of skilled older workers, and there's not an interim generation to kind of serve as a buffer. So you'll get to do more exciting things faster than previous generations have done, even if you're not quite ready from an expertise mastery standpoint to do that. So expect to make maybe a few more errors, because you're going to be pushed into situations, or you'll have the opportunity to have decision-making roles that are that normally you'd have normally meaning previous generations would have a more seasoned. You would have more seasoning before you were put into those roles. So expect more mistakes, but more opportunities, and that can accelerate your learning curve. And so it's so your first 10 years are going to be, we'll just call it exciting. Compared to previous generations, there's going to be a lot more going on for you guys. Most of it good. I mean, more opportunities is good. The to take on more decision making. In other words, having discretion. That's exciting. That's very rewarding. When things go well, you can look at it and say, "Hey, look, I did that thing." When things go badly, though, and you will have more of those than previous generations, take them as a learning experience. There is a great quote, and I don't know who to credit it to, but it's there's no such thing as a loss. I think it was Nelson Mandela. Either I win or I learn something, and I think that's there's wisdom there, and it's nice when you're in a career. That's the way to think about things. Either you're going to have a success or you're not, but as long as you learn something, then there's value in that experience. And so, does that make sense? Does that satisfy you? Is that how do you feel now? If this is what the next 9 to 10 years of your life looks like, how do you react to that?
I'm scared.
Scared why?
I don't like uncertainty.
So you would prefer a more structured approach that previous generations may have had, something that's laid out that says, okay, you're going to work in this position for 2 years, and then
And
you're
you're going to be able to afford rent, because that's a reasonable assumption that if you have a full-time job, you can live. Like, it'd be nice. All those things would be nice, but
well, there's those, the financial impacts are different than what we're talking about career arc, right? I mean,
indeed.
if you're
Yep.
focused, and I sense from talking to you over the last 3 weeks that the amount of money you're making is very important to you, because you're not at a subsistence level, or you're basically at a subsistence level at the moment, and that
Yeah,
you're
paying
not comfortable.
myself first is like a nice $25 to my savings account.
Yeah,
So,
well, and we've talked about this
mhm.
in previous calls too. I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of economic pressure on people starting their careers. Partly that's because of the economic headwinds, the macroeconomic headwinds. Part of it is because, we've got a lot of, I mean, when you've got 80 million people in your generation, that's a lot of people who are willing to work for maybe less than you're willing to work. And in our society, that, that's that supply and demand. And if somebody's willing to work for less and do the same job you are, then the employer is going to go with that person.
Well, there's the fear aspect, like on a career, less the economic stance, but kind of intertwined with it is also comes from, part of it is you start working at a lower wage and you work your way up into raises. But for a lot of us young 20 something, there's new fields every single day. And even if you're in a position where there's not a new field every day, you don't necessarily know what you want to dedicate your life to. So you can make headway somewhere, get raises, and then change your mind, and then you have to start all over again. But like, at what point do you run out of time to be able to afford to start all over again? Which is why it's scary. And then also, there's something else, but now I don't remember what it was.
Let me,
Uncertainty is scary. It's like also kind of just a personal fear, less than like a career generational fear. Is just kind of like, I already changed my mind once. So if the first 10 years of my career is volatile, because that's what all careers are going to look like, and I'm the mind changing person, how much worse is that going to be?
So it's never too late to do what you want to do, to pursue your goals. And we talked a little bit about this when we talked, when you're working one job and looking for another. And people have done this forever. Night school was invented for people who were working during the day. And what it means is that you have to, you're going to have to sacrifice time, right? I mean, and this will be the case for you as you do your veterinary technician coursework. You're going to work. You've got a full-time job. You're going to be working during the day, and so you're going to use your non-working time, that resource that you have, to build out skill sets that's going to put you in a position to do what you want to do. As you become more expert in anything, you become more valuable. A lot of your value depends on how many other people are also adding those talents and those skills. Because again, remember, we talked about supply and demand, and substitution, increases the supply, which pushes down the price. And then when we're talking about jobs, the price is your salary, your compensation. And so, but it's never too late to follow your heart and find the thing that will give you meaning. And because I think one of the things that I'm impressed by the Millennial and Gen Z folks is that they're not focused solely. I mean, obviously compensation is on your mind and it's on everybody's mind, but they're much more focused, and what's more important to them is it's not that they'll take a non-living wage, but they'll take less money to do something that's interesting to them, that's stimulating to them, and generally speaking. And I think that's all to your credit. And it's never too late to do that, but it will mean that you run out. I mean, you spend the first 20, 22 years of your life training to do the rest of your life, and a lot of that is around working, which is how you're going to make your contribution. And by and large, that's the biggest contribution that we all make to our society is in our jobs, and we get paid for doing that. There's it can be a little daunting when you're just at that transition point, which is where you are. You know, you graduated in May, started your job 3 months ago, and it's still very new to you. And it's going to be new. And this period, the first part of everybody's career, is always a little bit, you know, let me try some different things and see what I like. I mean, I started my first job out of college was a market research associate at an industrial brake and clutch manufacturer, and I lasted 10 months at that job. Was not what I loved. Paid well, but not what I loved. So I bailed out there. Went to graduate school for a year in business, but there wasn't, I mean, I hadn't got enough life experiences to make that experience particularly interesting. So then I went to work for a friend of mine who had a startup computer retail business. That was exciting. That was, I mean, there's a lot going on there. I lasted there 10 months and went to California to write. And ended up doing some temp work, which led to you know, another job in market research or product management in the end, but it was a marketing role, and my career started to evolve from there. So I mean, you can have a lot of false starts. I mean, I didn't start that you know, that marketing job until 1987. I was 27 years old, and so not everybody has a prescribed career path where you come out, you know, of school as, you know, as an econ major who goes into, you know, a market analyst position, and that's what you do for the rest of your career. I mean, that does happen, and there are a lot of people who do that, who know what they want to do, and they train to do that. You know, accountants and nurses and insurance people. You know, I had a good friend of mine who always wanted to be an insurance guy, and he's selling cars now. But you know, so it's never too late to recalibrate and reorient yourself. But it does mean that you're going to have to make sacrifices in terms of time, energy, money. You know, it's you know, you're going to have to earn your way. You know, until you're 22, basically. Well, until you're 18 for sure, and for many people, until you're 22, you know, somebody else is footing the bill for you in terms of living. And once you're past that, most people have to support themselves while they're doing their you know, while they're making their adjustments on their career path. But don't think that you're ever stuck in some place where you're not enjoying it and you think that there's better, that you'd enjoy something and be more stimulated elsewhere. You should always pursue that responsibly, but yeah, always pursue that. So
Okay.
so it's never too late is what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
Does that reassure you at all?
Kind of.
Does it?
Let's talk about my glory years, because I really feel like I'm going to peak at 30. So what then?
Well, yes. So you're mid-career, right? So mid-career is going to be very, very good for millennials and Gen Z, I believe.
Like I said, peaking at 30.
Peaking at 30. Well, I think
that's how it's going to be for me.
I think you're going to peak closer to 40, frankly, and maybe into your 40s, because what'll happen? What's that?
I'm already going gray.
Well,
you're like 30 is going to be the top.
You're a poser if you think you're gray, man.
I have a little spot right there.
Well, you've always had that light streak in your hair. So.
Well, that's the blonde one. That's not a gray one. I have some gray though.
All right. Yeah, so let's talk about mid-career, because, you know, while your early part of your career has been exploring and building expertise, you know, by the time you hit that 10-year mark in your career, you probably will have found a niche, something that you enjoy, something you find challenging, and you will have become an expert in that area. And that's when you really start to make contributions. Now you're going to have that whole boomer population will be gone from the workplace. So a lot of people, and then you've got this thin Gen X layer that's also not super interested in being the boss. So there's not many of them not really interested in running things. So this is the time, I think, that mid-career, from the time you're 30 to about, you know, 45, say, or, you know, mid-30s to late 40s, we'll say, is when you're going to have greater responsibilities sooner than previous generations. You know, this is where your generation is going to make its mark, is during this time period, because one, the road will be clear for you. There won't be anybody standing in your way in these companies and organizations in the workplace. And two, you will have learned the skills, the knowledge, the experiences to make you expert in your field, so that you will do, you can execute your responsibilities with competence. And so this is where you're going to go. And because you're going to get more responsibility sooner, but that compensation for those roles will probably be higher. So you will achieve career advancement faster than previous generations. You'll get paid more earlier than previous generations, generally speaking, for similar type work. And you'll be able to execute your responsibilities competently and actually do well in that regard. So I think your mid-career, you're going to have a lot more opportunities. The gaps are going to be there. There'll be nobody in your way, and with a little bit of defined direction that you're going to spend the first 10 years of your career. And one of the things that's going to make those first 10 years volatile are these economic headwinds. I mean, most of the people that were or the greatest percentage of people that were furloughed or jobs were eliminated during this COVID pandemic recession were really millennials and people less experienced in the workplace because they weren't expert yet. They weren't contributing as much, and therefore they were more expendable. And so, so right now, in addition to those, sort of self exploration, building the expertise and the skill, you've also got, because you're not super skilled yet, you're not expert yet, you're not as valuable yet, those are the jobs that are being eliminated. So that's part of that volatility. But that once you become expert, once you sort of get to that threshold, the world's going to be your oyster. It's going to be, those early 30s to late 40s, I think you're going to find, by and large, you're going to be very productive, personally productive, as well as professionally productive years for these millennials and Gen Zs.
Question. Mm-hmm. Is being laid off, and let's say you're working what you want to be doing, getting laid off in that during this COVID time, is that going to set my generation back in terms of when we can become experts? I know on like a purely, if we're going by exactly 5 years, yes, but like.
Yeah, a lot of it depends. Are you taking this time to build skills, because it's, your role, that 5 years, 10,000 hours, isn't just about doing one thing. It's about learning the whole job, which includes soft skills, how to communicate with people, how to understand and relate to people who you're interacting with. It's about problem solving and problem identification. And, a lot of these skills are not just about learning accounting, for instance. I mean, so if I'm an accountant, which I'm not, but if I were, I would be doing the books for companies. I'd be logging expenses and revenues and coding them and then producing reports and analyzing those reports. But I'd also be presenting those reports to company leaders. I'd be interacting with suppliers and vendors. I'd be interacting with customers, not really customers, but I'd be looking at information from customers and coding that. I'd be investigating how managers internally are spending the spending decisions. So I'd be doing all this work, and I'd be, but each one of those things has multi dimensions to it. And so, and what I do for, let's say, an industrial manufacturer, so my Warner Electric brake and clutch, my industrial brake and clutch manufacturer business is going to look a whole lot different than what I'm going to do for the corner grocery store. That's a retail establishment in groceries, which is totally different than what I would do for an agriculture company, a farm, a big industrial farmer, for instance. All of those things, I'm still doing accounting. I'm still doing I'm still logging expenses and revenues and categorizing and reporting on them in very prescribed ways, but I'm learning about each business in a different way, so that by the end of my 5 years, I've had a cross-section of experiences that makes me an expert in accounting. There's very few questions that you could ask me after 5 years of full-time work in accounting that I wouldn't have had something that I could say, this sounds a lot like that, and I've had experience with that, and so therefore I feel confident answering your question, because I've had a range of experiences. I've done this work over and over and over again, so I understand what happens. Oh, well, if this was, if this thing was different in this case, oh, okay, I've had that experience there was different. And as when I have enough of those, to give me a representative sample, and it takes about 5 years to build up that reservoir of experiences, then I'm an expert, and very little will surprise me. I won't say I won't ever be surprised, but I'll be able to relate. Even when I come across something I'm not familiar with, I probably have a frame of reference or some other thing in my experience and in my past that'll allow me to say, yeah, okay, I've seen this before, I know what to do. Whereas if, so let me ask you, I mean, you've probably already seen this, and well, you have. I mean, the first time you took blood from an animal, how well did that go compared to how well it goes after 3 months?
I think the British would call it a bloody mess.
Yes. Which time?
My blood got involved somehow, so I was kind of squirting blood everywhere. I was like pressing the needle wrong, so there was dog blood on the floor. It was like, it looked like a murder scene, and it didn't go great, but I did it. So
did it. And what about the last time you did it?
Most recently it went very well.
So there you go.
This is what I mean. I haven't found myself with the needle since the first time, which was how my blood got everywhere.
I gathered there was a puncture somewhere, but
yeah, I went to go squirt it into the vial that it was supposed to go into, and missed and went straight into my own thumb, which felt really bad. And then also me with something entering my skin, I eventually passed out afterwards also. So there's needle, blood, and now a fainting Addie. So it was.
Well, you come by that honestly. The only time I've had stitches, I fainted. So.
Yeah. Went about as bad as it could.
But the point there is that and that was as you get experience with different kinds of dogs. Okay, here's a little dog. Here's a big dog. Here's a dog that's agitated. Here's a dog that's calm. And that's just dogs. You start to get into cats and parrots, and I mean, you'll develop those experiences, and it'll take you about 5 years to. I mean, and this is just taking blood. Now you've also got all the other pieces of that job. So. You can see that it's going to take you a long time to master. It's going to take you about 5 years to master all the different pieces of the job that you will see over and over and over again. And that's what that. So when you get to that threshold, when you complete that, and getting back to your question about just being laid off, is that going to set you back? I would say that it depends. It's not all about the specific skills around that specific job. It's, when I say you're going to master something, I'm thinking more broadly than just a specific position. Because even 5 years, I mean, you can master a job in, a year or two. It's not uncommon right now in companies for those entry-level people to be promoted after a year. Does that mean they've mastered their job? No, but they've shown enough ability that you're willing to pay them a little bit more to keep them around while they develop their expertise. And, and because they're good enough to do specific tasks really well, and then you're going to work on a development plan to get them better so that after 5 years, they've mastered not senior analyst level work, but finance work together, all in finance work. So not finance work, not at a specific level, but more broadly, just what are the blocking and tackling and all the different things that happen when you're doing financial analysis, for instance. Same thing with veterinary technology. I mean, they will likely promote you before you're an expert. So don't equate expertise and promotion. But when you become an expert, you've seen you haven't seen everything, but you've seen enough of things that you will not be surprised by anything that happens, and you'll be able to contribute really, really well. And so that's something to. So it's kind of a wishy-washy answer to your question about is the layoff's not going to help you, but if you can find jobs that will teach you skills that'll be valuable, and this gets into this transferability. One of the things I was reading in preparation for this said that one of the things that millennials would be focusing on and would be wise to focus on are transferable skills, because you're not going to have. I mean, boomers don't have that, what our parents had, which was they joined a company and they worked there 35 years and then retired. That's, that model hasn't been in vogue for a very long time, including for boomers. And that's, you're going to have several different employers. You're going to want to develop skills that you'll be able to take from one to the other. And the more transferable your skills are, the better off you'll be. And so even during this time when you may not be, working on lighting or audio, because entertainment, the entertainment isn't happening right now. there's still softer skills and other things that you can do in the interim, like podcasts that'll make you more valuable because you're continuing to build skills that are relating to your field and relating to that area where you're building expertise, even though it's not specific technology or specific to a set job. So I don't know how satisfying an answer that was for you, but it doesn't have to set you back much, I guess, but it could.
I'm fine, so.
Okay, well, as good as it looks for your mid-career, late career is tough. It's tough for everybody. It's very typical for you to want to continue working longer than your company wants you to continue working for them. And the reasons for this go back to aging, right? Well, one, the more expertise you have, the more valuable you are to your company. However, as we discussed, learning new things is harder as you get older. So as you get into your 50s, you're going to be less able, and this is speaking broadly. I mean, there's always exceptions, and you'll always find that really sharp 60-year-old who's, really, hopefully, who's right on, who's still on the ball, who's not intimidated, who's learning, and able to retain that so not only has the appetite for it, but actually is able to record the things that he or she needs to record to be that thing. But by and large, typical, your average employee is going to lose the ability to learn new things very well. However, their crystallized abilities are very, very strong. So doing what they've always done, they're going to be really good at that. So if you're in a job that requires you to do the same thing you've been doing, as an older person, you're going to have a better experience, not perfect, but you're going to have a better experience than you will if you're in a job where you need to sort of stay abreast, you need to change, you need to be, take advantage of that fluidity, that mental fluidity, which is deserting you as you leave. And so your late career is going to be tougher. And as I said, your expectations around your learning are going to be you're going to have to learn a lot more than I had to learn. And I had to learn a lot more than my parents had to learn in their same career, because that pace of change is accelerating so much. So change means you got to learn new things. A lot of change is happening. So you're going to need to learn new things. And as you get on into your 50s, it's harder to learn new things. And if it's harder to learn new things, companies are not going to be super tolerant of that when they have younger people who are learning new things and able to step into those roles. And that, I saw that happen in my career. The last few years that I was in corporate America, the last 3, 4, 5 years, I kept asking for new things to do, and I wasn't getting them. They were going to people who were 5, 10, 12 years younger than me. Not because I couldn't do them, but just because these people had more trajectory, they had more career room to run, and they were probably able to pick things up quicker than I could. And so, I benefited from it early in my career, and then you pay for it later in your career. And for me, I was mid-50s when that started happening, early to mid-50s when that started to happen. But I've had friends in corporate America who had late 40, 48, 49, 50, 51 are being moved aside. Hello, Claire. And
for you.
just staring at me here. So, but the point is that age of, what's the good word for it? See, this is my mental fluidity. I can't come for it. But the age of obsolescence, we'll call it obsolescence, is going to get younger. And so that's something to keep in mind as you're thinking about your career. Is be aware that as you get late in your career, so when you get to your late 40s, early 50s, again, if you're in a career that has very established structure, you're going to be better because you're going to have those crystallized capabilities. So if you're an accountant, for instance, there's the generally accepted accounting principles change very slowly. And so if you're an accountant, you're in a very structured field, you'll be able to sustain and be able to contribute at a high level for much longer than somebody who isn't. I mean, if you're in a marketing organization or a technology company, you're not going to find many 60-year-old executives in these technology companies. And you're going to find fewer of them going forward because they just don't have the ability to get those, to be able to learn those new skills. which is not to say that they're useless, because again, you've got folks that depending on what the job is. I mean, if you're an engineer and you're, doing technology work, innovation, it's going to be hard. It's going to be harder for you to hang on the older you get compared to, somebody who's a sales guy. So if you're a sales person, your sales, those skills, those sales skills will still be relevant, and those are crystallized skills, so you'll still be good at it. And so you'll get your, you'll be able to hang on a little bit longer. So, the mental flexibility, I think, is going to be a really big piece. So what does that mean for your late career? It means that you better have an escape plan from your company. In other words, try to take control. And this is why you see a lot of people, when they leave their firms, turn to consultancy, right? I know what I know. I know it really, really well. And now I instead of having one company use that knowledge, which they may not need full time and may not want to pay me for it full time, there are going to be other companies out there that will need me. And I will put together a portfolio of companies. Instead of one employer, I'll have 6, or I'll have 8, or I'll have 12 who will use my skills on a part-time basis. They'll share me. I become a shared resource in that sense as a consultant, to get access to that expertise. So that's a path out of that sort of single employer that's not going to have less use for you as you age, because of your declining ability to change in the workplace. And so, you'll get to do what you already know how to do, which is your strength, your crystallized learning. And then, you'll get to the, you'll be able to add that value, and you'll still be able to work, and do what you do. The other thing, though, to remember is that you're going to be being pushed out of the workplace. Just as the baby boomers are retiring and leaving you opportunity, millennials are projected to have 75 million children. And so those people will be in the workplace in your late career. Those children are coming into the workplace at the bottom, and they're going to be looking for opportunities. They're going to be looking to drive organizations forward. They're going to have all the stamina. They're going to have all of the flexibility, mental acuity, flexibility, and things. So they're going to be pressuring you from below. So you've got a little bit of a vacuum at the top that's going to pull you along, but then you're going to have on the bottom end, you're going to have a bigger generation pushing you forward. I think we might have to have a word with your audio engineer, your audio intern there, Ed.
She was hunting her own reflection, and then she just pushed my computer off its stack.
Yes, well.
But now she's scared of it, so she ran away.
She's run away.
So anyway,
so just in summary, you've got volatile early years, 10 years of exploration, and things kind of, a little bit unstable, a little uncertain, which is going to give you some anxiety. Then you're going to have a good mid-career run. Lots of opportunities. You'll be expert in things. You'll be able to. You're going to get more opportunities to do things sooner. But then late career, you're probably not going to be as fully appreciated, and by a single employer. And so you'll want to think about how to create an exit strategy from a single company, and how to work that out. And again, these are all speaking extremely broad. Does that make sense to you? Does that feel? How does that feel to you?
I'm gonna peak at 30.
Not at 30. You got till mid 40s at least.
I'm gonna peak at 30. I think the gluten's gonna get to me at like 38.
Well, I don't think you're going to peak at 30. You're going to start your peak. You're going to start your climb to the peak at 30. You're going to bounce around a little bit, and then it's going to be a nice uphill run. So, so mid-career is going to be, you're going to love the mid-career. And frankly, late career can be very satisfying too, as long as you've accounted for the fact that.
Yeah, I've got 19 years of gluten brain though, so that's going to come haunt me eventually.
Well, maybe, but you've been working that, your brain has been multiplying, and your body cells have been multiplying without gluten for quite some time now. So
that's true.
Yeah, I mean,
3 years.
There is not a cell in your body that's older than a year.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Go team. So I'm 1 year old.
The cells in your body are 1 year old, but they didn't all reproduce at the same time. So
sad.
You're not. Which is why, one of these days, I'd love to look at aging because it's fascinating. The people who study gerontology, aging is, they're a little confused at times because logic says you shouldn't age if your cells are just reproducing. You shouldn't age, but you do. And you lose mental acuity and physical stamina as you do. So
I don't need to lose any more physical stamina.
no, well,
I already have like 2. I have 2 stamina.
my physical fitness score is very, very low because we haven't been able to exercise either because of the heat or the smoke out here in California for some time. So sadly, I am also approaching 0.
I went on a hike today, so
good for you. All right, so we're way over time than usual, but it was a very involved conversation. So keep your career arc in mind at every step of the way. Know when you're going through this early career froth and volatility that's just what it is. Be ready to take advantage of the opportunities that present themselves mid-career. Be aggressive in your mid-career to pursue what you want because you'll have an open highway. There's not going to be a lot of people in the way tell you, no, let's not do that. If you've come in, you're coming with ideas, they're going to need you. So a lot more opportunity in that mid-career time frame, and then have an exit strategy or a mitigation strategy for when you become less valuable to a single employer late in your career. And then you'll have a very satisfying work life if you're able to kind of manage through those different phases.
Sounds good.
So no Venmo today. Despite the cat pushing over your computer, you were able to control your tongue.
It was kind of cute.
It was very funny to see her just sort of staring into the camera. Those of you who are listening to the podcast will miss this, but if you want to go to YouTube and watch it, you can see Claire's face up close and personal at more than one point during this discussion.
Frequently, it's just like her eye in the bottom corner.
Right, exactly. So, all right, well, take us home, man. Let's get out of here.
All right, well then you guys can find us on awkwardfamilyconversations.com, at Twitter, at awkwardfamilyc1. I know it now, although it's still written. You can find us on YouTube at Awkward Family Conversations, Facebook, same thing, and you can find us on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts, or wherever other random place you get your podcasts. Let us know what you think via comments or text messages. There's still the thread every week. And next time we will tackle the biggest question honestly for me, but I know a lot of people my age also want to know this, is how do you make a difference early in your career? Because we have no control over things right now.
You might have more control than you think. So
the intern can always just push over the computer. So
the intern has the most control. That should tell you something. So. And she's back. And she's back. All right, Ed. I love you. Have a great week.
I love you too, Dad.
All right, bye-bye.